Joining us now on Empty the Bench, a returning guest, a guy we really like. We've had him on a few times before to break down an interesting story dilemma going on in the media world from front office sports. AJ Perez. AJ, thanks for coming back on with us.
Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, AJ. Just because of the madness that has unfolded, it has been just about half a day, a little less since from the time that we're doing this, that all these ESPN layoffs have been going on, and we don't technically have all 20 names just yet. But with all these layoffs and the leaves, like this is the big one that has been talked about now for a while. I remember back in like 2017, you had all the behind the scenes people who were getting cut, and we thought that was the big one. Not knowing what would wait
six time. And that's the same time when John Clayton and some other huge names got let go. Trent Dilfer, I think it was in 2018 around that time. So this is nothing new, but it's kind of like looking back at 5-6 years ago at how much the media landscape has changed. ESPN still obviously the behemoth that it is, but even they can't spend unlimited funds. They're spending a lot of money on these media rights deals, including Big 12 and some others out there. So.
Well, can we see a change at this point? Because I think I saw some tweet that had said basically this is going to change how it conducts like business with personalities, media, behind the scenes media talent, that basically in negotiations, ESPN is going to be a little tougher.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that's true. And there's going to be the NBA is coming up in a couple of years. NBC wants to get back into it. They're still going to have to spend. And, the networks, obviously ABC is also Disney owned like ESPN. The networks kind of rely on sports, especially the NFL for live sports programming. And they're going to I don't know if we're at the point where we're going to see less money going towards the major sports, but I think we're going to see a slowdown. I mean, I think just how much more these leagues get and conferences in college sports get for these media rights deals. I think we're going to see a little more of a stagnation. It's not going to be a spike like it's been, but I think they're going to be looking at everything, and these cuts are awful, and I feel bad for everybody who was involved, especially when you got Pat McAfee coming in and making about $20 million a year, and we had that Mike McCarthy, our media reporter, had a story about them several weeks ago about those at ESPN kind of like, well, we're doing layoffs here, you just brought this guy in, how much Stephen A makes. Those are huge personalities, huge names. What we saw today was a lot of people who are make a lot of money. Let's say Steve Young, and I barely broke that one today by a few minutes. They're where he's only on Monday Night Football, pregame show. So that's there's not going to be any luxuries left pretty much anywhere in the sports media these days. I think we're going to see that no matter where you're at. You have to, if you're only working, only going to work the fall on certain broadcasts, there's it versus Pat McAfee, to his credit, is going to be on the air every day. And we reported that he was going to take over Kellerman's show. So that it's a few weeks back, I still want to see how Pat McAfee translates to being on an ESPN Disney-owned property. I think, I'm not. If there's a lot of people who don't think it's going to translate, I think it's going to be fine. Maybe I would like to see an alternate feed or something where you can say whatever you want, F-bombs and all. But I think right now ESPN's putting more priority on people who are visible daily versus talent, who is great talent. And there's a lot of people that got let go today, Keyshawn and a lot of others, who aren't on the air as much. I think that's kind of what we saw today.
And I like how you brought up the old thing about the focus on live sports, them being the worldwide leader, because it actually translates now over to my next question, because you consider all the deals ESPN has made over the past years, trying to keep Monday Night Football, bringing the UFC over to ESPN. And actually, one of my co-hosts on the MMA show I actually just said that Dana's going for negotiations to extend that deal. Yes. We make mention of the NHL being brought back to ESPN, and Monday Night Football and the MLB wildcard game, their rounds now on ESPN and ABC. I feel like these layoffs have shown what I call here the content over commentators, I should say, pardon me. Basically that it doesn't matter who's really doing the games. It's just a matter of, do they have the content? And I think that's actually been, it doesn't help that we have now ESPN Plus, so it means so much more content that it's just you could throw whatever commentator in there. It's just a matter of, do they have the live sports?
Yeah, Jeff Van Gundy being let go was like the biggest name early in the day, and I didn't see that one coming. That was not one of the names that I had heard. There's been names floating about for many weeks. That's kind of he's a lead analyst during cover the NBA finals. It's like you think that he would that he'd be safe, but no, and he's great at his job. I think there are a lot of the reaction I saw today in social media was like Jeff Van Gundy. Obviously, I think people are gonna said they miss them, and I think Steve Young's up there too, as well. And it's people are they're going to move on with other talent. There's ESPN still has a deep roster of talent. I think we're going to see a bigger role for Mina Kimes and some others, and Doris Burke on the NBA side, stepping up. I think we really don't know how it's going to shake out, but they do still have a deep roster of talent. And I think a lot of some of the names we didn't see today, possibly it could have been, there are a lot of behind the scenes renegotiating of contracts. I've talked to one person who I had on the list, and that person was like, we'll see, or I'm trying to renegotiate. So that person's name didn't come up today. Whether that person's going to get extended or not, but this was a mix of people who were, Chelios that we broke the story a couple weeks ago. Chris Chelios in studio in NHL analyst, his contract expired. So his contract was up. But this was a lot of people who had years left on their deals. So that's going to be, they have to, eat a lot of that, depending on the contract language. A lot of, they have to eat a lot of that money. I'm sure there's a buyout provision in some of these contracts as well. That'll save them money, but you're also losing talent. I mean, we see other layoffs where people can't work until their contract's over. It's kind of like it's almost like I wouldn't say it's an accounting gimmick. It's the way corporations work. But I have no idea if these every contract's a little different. If some of these people can bounce back right away, can work right away. We usually with some of the other buyouts and layoffs over the years, you had to get permission to work. Look at Ed Werder doing it when he got laid off in 17, 18, whatever that was. He had to get permission to do his podcast. Now he's back at ESPN. So there's it's going to be interesting to see how this all shakes out and where these people land. Especially now, you've got Skip Bayless, who needs a new co-host for his show on FS1, and a couple of these names that we saw today could land up in the running there.
Well, I want to move over to the radio side a little bit, because that's where I worked in radio for 4 years at ABC in New York. With guys like Keyshawn, you talked about Kellerman, Fitz got laid off. Do you see basically ESPN, I hate to say this in a not trying to sugarcoat it way, they just don't care about radio anymore?
Yeah. Who owns ESPN Radio? Is it good humor? Or what's
that? Good Karma. Good Karma brand.
Karma. There we go. Yeah. So I covered that with Favre. I couldn't remember. Because they own a lot of these stations in major markets. It's not really Disney owns them. I'm sure they still own a few of them. But it's kind of like, they're almost going to a Fox Sports Radio model. Fox Sports Radio is branded, but it's actually third channel. Well, now it's iHeartRadio. So, I think once it was reported, a couple weeks ago that they're getting rid of the morning show, and that was Keyshawn, that was Kellerman, and Jay Williams. Once we heard of those rumblings, it was. I mean, look at back when ESPN Radio launched with Tony Bruno and all these huge hosts. Back when I was in college. Oh, that's how old I am. So it was such a beacon back then, and it's kind of, we saw ESPN magazine go away. I think we're seeing ESPN Radio go the same way. It's sad. I think while their podcasts are sure doing well, I think ESPN Radio, they're trying to figure out what's going to work there, and I think the cost cutting we've seen, it has hit radio, and a lot of people people don't know. A lot of people behind the scenes, production people, when shows get canceled, doesn't matter radio or TV. A lot of people who work in production also lose their jobs, and so that's that wasn't a part of this 20 on-air talent list that was let go today, but they've been doing that for a few years now.
I mean, there's a couple directions I'll go here. I'll go with the ones that you talked about, the morning show. 3 morning shows since Mike and Mike went off the air. And when you look at all 3 iterations, they were just, I don't know, I would say a thumbs down at best. I mean, they just were not great replacements. Do you see ESPN and even other networks possibly just going away from maybe just national morning radio and keeping the rest of the lineup?
it's always tough because it's like I'm a West Coast guy. I've got 45 minutes left on the Jim Rome Smack Off to listen to today. I've been so busy. So I just don't think these shows resonate outside of New York. I think that's outside of the East Coast, outside of where these shows are produced from. It's a hard sell, especially markets like LA, which is an awful sports radio market. Already, people want their local hosts. So how much you have to kind of balance it out. You have to have a big name that people will like. You got to pay a lot for that big name, and you have to promote that big name versus it's a lot versus having a local host who's probably more connected with the fans. But you have to also replicate that multiple times in every other market. There's really ESPN has never really found that balance. I think it's a hard one to do, and even CBS Radio. I think a lot of people are probably not Jim Rome fans on the East Coast, maybe not as much. He's on CBS Sports Radio. There's a lot of other great CBS Sports Radio, which is owned by Odyssey. Hosts there that I think CBS right now, I guess, would be the leader, but Fox Sports is right there, and ESPN is kind of, I guess, third at this point, depending on how you look at it.
I mean, when I look at the lineup, the classic lineup for me, the Mike and Mike, the Colin Cowherd, the SVP, the Dan Levitard, that was kind of their classic lineup. Everybody was tuning into ESPN Radio every day to hear those shows. And as soon as Cowherd went out the door to Fox and Levitard, his show was just getting picked apart by the end. And he just said, F it, I'm out of here. I can't deal with this anymore. I mean, would you say that was kind of the classic and it hasn't been the same since?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that looking back to, you're right. I think that as far as the history of ESPN Radio going back 25 years or so, I think that could have been the best lineup they've ever had. It's sad. It's like you become a target. I think Cowherd partially for what he does on air as well. But he became very attractive to Fox Sports, because of that. And I think Dan Levitard, obviously, with going out of his zone, with Meadowlark, launching there and being able to do whatever he wants. Freedom is huge to what you can do at a certain point. Now we see the reverse of McAfee. He had the freedom. Now he's going to ESPN. It's kind of the opposite. So we'll see what's going to happen there. But it's once you make a name for yourself and you want to do your things your way, I think you want to go to some place that will pay you, to do that and also give you that freedom.
I mean, just looking at some other guys, you were talking about Max. I want to talk about Max Kellerman a little bit because his spot he was up here, then he kind of just went and dove off the mountain. Now, after the whole Stephen A. debacle on First Take, getting thrown off of there, even though Stephen A. will deny a million times that he never threw him off there, but what do you see with his situation? I know that obviously he got laid off, but did he just get a bad situation or was he just in a decline? What do you see with Max?
Yeah, I think it was. It's probably a lot of these moves. I think were just salary related. I don't think it had really much to do with their value or what they're thought of internally. Stephen A. got fired from ESPN. He bounced back. I mean, he got fired. He got a show taken away. I think he was away for a little bit. When his radio show is way back when. Now, obviously, Stephen A. is like he can do whatever he wants now, and he's making him and Pat McAfee are taking home a nice payday every week, I guess. But it's Max, his niche is boxing, and boxing is a sport that it's not NFL, it's not NBA. He has his fans, he has that. But I don't think boxing was enough to keep him there. We saw that. I think once Pat McAfee's taken over his show, and then we saw what happened with the radio show as well. I think there just wasn't it was hard to justify how much Max was making for what he was basically left with, and that's no fault of Max Kellerman's. It just kind of the way these things kind of work out. He had his 2:00 show on ESPN. I don't know the ratings were great or bad. I think that's a hard spot anyway. I think he did a fine job. It just kind of once they hiring Pat McAfee and the radio show going away, I think that was just really hard to justify. And I don't think it's probably not. He's probably wasn't one of the candidates that he would be like, yeah, I'll take half, 40%, 30% pay cut to stay here. I don't think, because I think he has other options, and maybe that's with Skip Bayless. Who knows?
That would be interesting. Moving over to Keyshawn, because you were mentioning that before. I think he was in the first year of a 5-year, $18 million deal, if I'm not mistaken. Now, obviously, all these guys who get laid off are going to get paid, and that's what's going to happen. Well, at least in negotiation's sake. Now, I also heard that, I don't know if it's true, that ESPN is going to basically write off against these contracts, essentially, and it's basically to impress Wall Street, essentially, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's kind of like for the next quarterly report for Disney, we're going to see, kind of a lot. We'll probably have some details how much salary they did write off this quarter. It's right at the end of the quarter too, so we should be able to get this in the next few weeks. I'm not sure when Disney reports next, but we'll actually see that. Now you're right. They can write down this as a basically a loss. That is and I wouldn't say accounting trick, like I said earlier. It's more of just kind of the way it is, and it's a way to move somebody off the books. And yeah, you're right. That means someone with that much time left on there, and there's other people that 2 or 3 years left as well. It's kind of you're going to get paid now. These contracts I've not seen these personally, but they may have 80% buyout or something like that. There may be some provision in there, but they're going to get most or not, if not all of that money. And it's kind of frustrating because you feel I've been in a situation. You feel like why not going to renew me or going to lay me off when I got time left, and it's like, well, it's like, you're still paying me, why can't I still do my job? It's like, and it's a maddening thing for a journalist or someone on their personality, because you're still paying me, but you're not using me, and it's kind of like now and possibly I can't work anywhere else during this time.
Last one on the radio side. By the way, speaking to AJ Perez of Front Office Sports, follow him at by AJ Perez on social media. I'm going to put you on the executive's chair here for a second. On the radio side, how do you see this playing out? Do you see them really putting names back in the lineup, or are they really just going to makeshift this lineup going forward?
I'm gonna, like I said, I know they're not I call them good karma. Yeah, good karma is gonna have probably has to say in it since they have so many of these stations. I think they're gonna have to. I wouldn't be so shocked if they're like, hey, what the heck? I mean, if ESPN's not providing, the names that they can sell, and the names that they are proud to put on their stations, I think that's going to be an issue. Will that mean? What does that mean? Good karma will have to, foot the bill themselves, or will they have to move away from it, or? Are we going to go see just a purely branding thing moving forward in a few years? I think, there's still a lot of people at ESPN who could do these jobs and do these jobs well. We just really don't have any idea yet, what that's going to look like.
All right, moving away from radio, back to the NBA property, because that seemed to get hit a little bit, obviously with Van Gundy. Also, Jalen Rose. Now, I thought that was interesting, and obviously he had Jalen Jacoby. That got canceled a little while ago back. He was on NBA Countdown. He did get up for a little while. How do you see his situation playing out? Because he was a big personality, and ESPN cares about personalities a la Pat McAfee. But what do you think about Jalen Rose's situation?
Yeah, I think he's, I was a fan. I think he was, you like guys who speak the truth, and I think Jalen did. He didn't hold back. Yeah, I think he was, I'm not a huge NBA person, but when I did watch, I thought, I think I was, I gravitated toward what he was saying, because he has great insight. He's played the game. He's, and he can basically, he can take take opinions and put them out there in digestible form, and with force when needed. That's why Jalen was a shocker for me. I think, Keyshawn, I know that's a different sport, but yeah, Keyshawn also was kind of those guys really spoke, said what was on their minds, and I think that's what ESPN wanted, but obviously they couldn't justify the expense apparently. But yeah, we're gonna see a whole different. And we've seen a lot of changes over the last few years with the NBA, especially with the studio show, and we're gonna see more now.
I'm not as big like you on the NBA side as my co-host here, but I am big with the NFL stuff. And the NFL side of ESPN got hit quite a bit too. Susie Colbert, Steve Young, Matt Hasselbeck. I think Colbert even just came there. And now all of a sudden there's going to be all these cuts. And obviously they don't have as many properties as some of the other networks and with the NBA. So they had the NFL draft coverage, they had the Monday Night Football, they have NFL Live. What is going to happen now with the ESPN's NFL coverage after all these releases?
I think McShay too. That was
and Thomas Shea as well.
Yeah, I mean McShay. I was like, wow, you lost. I always think I've been joking with my friends. I'm like, I want to be a draft analyst and just be wrong and pick wrong mock drafts for 2 or 3 months, and then it sounds like a great job. But it's yeah. I mean, I think Todd was the best draft analyst they had. At least one that I'm sure there's some stat nerds who are great too. But as far as on air people, I thought that's a loss for the draft. I think that. And losing the analysts that they did in Young, and obviously Colbert doing what she does and she's been doing for 20, almost 30 years there. That's tough. It's gonna Booger he'll still be around. There we got. I think RG3 is going to have a bigger presence. So I think we're like I said, they'll move people around, and maybe it could end up being a better show. Who knows? I think that's going to be tough. Losing the talent that they had to make it better. We always hear this: do more with less. We've heard that in the media for 20 years now. There's going to be a drop off, and I think it's going to maybe they can after a couple of weeks of the season, maybe they'll find some legs, maybe it'll be great. But I think it's going to be a shock, for at least for the first, at least preseason, first couple of games of the year, seeing these hosts will be kind of, they have to, it'll take some time to get into the groove and have fans kind of adjust to it.
Now, this kind of connects with some of the questions I had asked earlier, but is this going to be something cyclical? Like I mentioned how ESPN and UFC are negotiating their deal for an extension. It feels like whenever some new content or some new big personality name is coming in, is this something that we should just prepare for at this point? More firings?
Yeah, I know. It's kind of sad to think about that, but yeah, we're going to see. But you also have to. You don't want to in the sports that have contracts coming up. Let's say the NBA and UFC. UFC is totally different because it doesn't matter. I mean, UFC produces their own content. ESPN is just a fire hose for them. But you have still got to pay for it. But when you see the NBA losing Jalen and a couple others today, you don't want to hurt the product because leagues don't just want money. They want good presentation. They want stability. They want to be able to, these executives or team owners around the league want to turn this on and be proud of the product being shown. And I think so you can't cut so much. I think at NHL, I think we didn't see many outside of Chelios. Really didn't see anything, but he cut in NHL, which is probably says to how behind ESPN is with the NHL coverage to TNT. I think they're probably going to spend more or redo some things. I think they're pretty far behind TNT. Granted, they have higher ratings because they have ABC to put the Stanley Cup Finals on. This year, TNT, I was like 40% down from last year because, first of all, it was an awful series. Second of all, it was even TNT had I think had some better presentation. They're cable only. So that hurt them. So I think you basically come back to it. You can make cuts, but you just can't make you cannot cut so much where league executives, especially when renewals are coming up, they're going to be like, hey, you did this. I didn't like this move. I didn't like why'd you kill this show? They're not going to probably get to kill anything in NBA related shows, but why did you do this? Why did you do that? They're not going to call ESPN and say, hey, keep Jalen. But they're going to notice over time if they think their shows or studio shows or their broadcasts aren't up to par.
Fair enough. All right, one last question from me, AJ. So after today's news, and just in general, sometimes when you see these kind of firings at networks or bigger name media companies, it's sometimes like, if I remember being a student, and then sometimes it's like a little shaking. What do you tell somebody? Obviously, these are much bigger names and personalities, compared to some of the behind the scenes names that got released about 5-6 years ago. But if you see somebody who is studying broadcasting or journalism or any form of media in the colleges and universities across America, what do you tell these kids after seeing the kind of just hammer dropping like what happened at ESPN?
Yeah, this wasn't, there's so many former athletes that were part of this who made millions of dollars that I really, and look at Steve Young, he has a lot to agree to. There's certain players I'm like, I don't want to see anybody lose their job. Like, he's just crap on the internet. Oh, well, they went woke. And like, oh, Jesus, that's not why. It's so frustrating. But yeah, there's I feel for the people we don't know who got laid off. Names that aren't going to recognize, because that's all of us. I mean, I don't. I do okay, but I'm not a number. I'm not a huge. I don't make $20 million a year. So what I would tell them is just make yourself as valuable as possible, and it's not even going to save you. It's not. The frustrating part is it's not going to even save you. You could be the most versatile. You could be a cheap employee even. If a bean counter upstairs doesn't know you, sees your salary and says, "Oh, we can get rid of that." That's what happens. And it's like it's very, very rarely in these situations is it the producer of these shows, who's going to be asked, hey, person A or person B. It's somebody upstairs, maybe someone in Burbank, maybe someone in Disney even. I mean, at Disney headquarters. They just see numbers. So the hard part is just, what you have to do is basically, if you're in school now, is do as much as you can, make yourself as valuable as possible. Don't stick to one sport early in your career. Try to get investigative work in. There's so much court stuff, cop stuff, doing stuff like that. Make yourself invaluable that way. Now, granted, I've been laid off 3 times, so I really shouldn't be the one to give advice to. But that's what it is. Just don't, and also don't make yourself a target. Now that means usually it's not going to mean salary normally. It's going to mean don't be dumb on Twitter. So stuff like that. Just hang back. I'm older. My career, I'm 20 plus years in. I can say a little more things on Twitter than other people. I still don't go off wild on it, but there's so just kind of work hard. Just keep asking questions at work. Ask for more work. Take on more responsibilities. I'm not saying work 80 hours a week. I'm not saying that either. But just do as much as you can, and try to contribute as much as you can, and try to make yourself valuable. And now that's going to be that could mean a higher paycheck down the line, better role. But it's you just want, and also in these circumstances when you lose your job, if you can only do one sport or do one thing, I'm not saying for these big names, because I think a lot of them are going to be fine. Most of them are going to land on their feet somewhere. I know we had obviously Buzzer kind of went under today. It's a lot of other media businesses. And I saw Cut. I think Barstool had some people that were cut. This is it's end of the fiscal year for a lot of companies, so this is the time. This time around Christmas is when this stuff usually comes down. So it's So just hang in there, work hard. It's really just kind of like, I'm sure you're getting the same advice from other journalism professors, but just keep your head down and work, and try not to make $40 million and become a target.
Easier said than done. AJ Perez, Front Office Sports. Very interesting conversation on ESPN. Layoffs again and again, and I'm sure we're going to hear this a million times. But AJ, thanks for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much,
No
AJ.
problem. Thanks for having me back.